We are live.
Alrighty. I would like to call the hearing to order and acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory and the home and the traditional lands of the Ojibwe, the Cree, Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Ron Merritt. I'll be your chairperson this afternoon. Introducing panel members is Linda McFadden, who is present, and via Zoom is Mr. Ian Mahone, and representing the city of Winnipeg is Mr. Roddy Pontania. Our recording secretary is Belen Rojo. This afternoon, we'll be hearing application for revision assessment role in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matter for which revision is requested has been described in each application, and we'll limit discussions to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anybody speaking in these matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by City Council and is independent along with the City Administration. We make our decisions based on the evidence provided at the hearing and issue a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board decision in respect to application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to application of exemption from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, the information on how to do so will be included in the board's order. In respect to the hearing this afternoon, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then it'll be the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have the opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about the application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket this afternoon. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's order or a decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and will be part of the public record. This afternoon, we'll be hearing items 1 to 8 on our docket. So I ask Ms. Rojo to swear in the assessor and to probably affirm the applicant's testimony. Thank you.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Roddy Pontania.
And do you affirm the evidence you're about to present at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Earl Freimer.
And do you affirm the evidence you're about to present at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Alrighty, gentlemen and ladies, we'll go to the first item on the docket, which is 182 Goulet Street. So Mr. Pontania, whenever you're ready, you can take us through this property. And I understand that there are 3 points of appeal here. So you can read it into the to the record, Roddy, and then we'll deal with the liability.
Okay, sounds good. So the file that we have in front of us is 22-1348. The roll number is 0607-500-1500. The address is 182 Goulet Street. The 2023 assessed value has gone out at $1,545,000. And I do have a recommendation to make on this file.
You go right ahead then.
Okay, so as we scroll down to the income stream, if we can take a look at the pictures on the way so I don't have to come back, that just gives you an idea of the subject property there. Looks to be a commercial neighborhood shopping center. And let's go down to page 9 on my brief. It might be 8 on yours. And it'd be the subject's income stream.
Go ahead, Roddy.
Okay, so originally what had gone out for this valuation, we have 4 premises on the income stream. We have 928 square feet at $18.43 per square foot. 4,435 square feet at $11.94 per square foot, 1,016 square feet at $18.32 per square foot, and then 1,024 square feet at $18.31 per square foot. So that gives us a total leasable area of 7,403 square feet and the total potential rent of $107,419. From there, we have applied model parameters of a 4% vacancy, 3% expense, and a $9 shortfall to bring us to a net operating income of $97,363. As well, we have a cap rate that was applied that was model based at 6.3% to bring us to the assessed value of $1,545,000. So this subject had it had a little bit of some moving parts to consolidate. So one of the original items that were on the appeal was that the subject was operating as a non-for-profit charitable organization, and so that's where the class and liability request comes in for the for this file. And so after a review, it was deemed that we can grant the class and liability on the subject. And so when I took a look at the subject's income and expense mailer and compared it to what we had on the income stream, it looked like at some point in the past, the space that they had allocated of 5,363 square feet was divided into what you see of 4,435 square feet and 928 square feet. So at some point in the past, I'm not sure why this is divided into two spaces. Well, a look at the mailer led me to understand that it is being used as one space, and it's being used by the non-for-profit charitable organization in that space. So the first adjustment that I made was to consolidate the area. So I added 4,435 square feet to 928 square feet, and that gave me 5,363 square feet, which was the square footage that was being listed on the mailer. So that confirms that that area was allocated for that subject, as it added up to what was being declared on the mailer. So once I made that adjustment and I put it into the system, the rental rate that it was producing, it wasn't a great rental rate for the subject. I was trying to match it to what was being declared as actuals, but it was coming in a little strong. And so the second step for the adjustment was to put an override rental rate of $13 per square foot. So that turns that space into 5,363 square feet at $13 per square foot. I did a review, and the other two premises are within the square footage that's being declared. And so I left those at the modeled rental rates of $18.32 per square feet and $18.31 per square feet. So if we're looking at this subject as a whole, before I give you the split values, if we look at it as a whole, the revised overall potential rent now is $107,082, and that's for 7,403 square feet. Am I going too fast, or are you guys okay?
No, you're fine.
Okay.
We're fine.
So then,
sorry, if you could just repeat that gross income, the gross potential income for me, please.
Yeah. So once I did my my reallocations, the total potential rent is now $107,082.
Thank you.
So 107,082. And then from there, we have model parameters of a 4% vacancy, a $9 shortfall per square foot, and a 3% other for expense to give us a revised net operating income of $97,049. So $97,049. As well, after doing a review of some market data and some capitalization information that we had internally, it was deemed that a slight adjustment to the cap rate was deemed appropriate. So the last step was to make a cap rate adjustment from 6.3% to 6.75%. And that seemed to be a more appropriate cap rate for the subject. And then the total revised assessment that we're offering as a recommendation is $1,438,000.
And is there a breakdown, Roddy?
Yes, there is a breakdown. So that takes care of it, looking at it as a whole. And then when we put it into a split, the split is 505,000 at 60T. And then 933,000 at 40S. And I believe that equals up to the 1,438,000, which I already said, and that should be my presentation on the file.
Just give us the 60 one more time.
Did you want the whole income stream or just the final value?
No, just the 60.
505,000, 505.
Okay. Mr. Reimer, are you in agreement?
Not quite, but we are very, very much closer now.
Okay. I think then what we'll do is, do you want to go into the liability, Mr. Reimer?
I certainly can, and I should explain so that the board understands. And Mr. Pontinia, I would like to thank you for your diligence on all items on this property. There, as you say, there was a number of moving parts. Concerning liability and classification, very briefly then, the materials that Mr. Pontinia and I were looking at start, if you could open our brief at page 14. So at page 14, the organization that we are suggesting should be granted the school tax exemption, which the department's now agreeing with, is called Connect Employment Services. And they're a charity who, under the framework of the legislative exemption provisions, are providing relief to what the legislation terms as aged, indigent, or sick persons. It's sort of a broad category. And if you go down then to the bottom of page 14, there's a summary there, and it says Connect Employment Services is a nonprofit community-based organization that supports adults with intellectual disabilities living in the city of Winnipeg to work and participate in the community. And then in the following pages 15, or following page 15, I should say, there's some further information and also included in the attachments. So I guess, Mr. Chairman, with the joint recommendation to recognize the applicability of the school tax exemption here, we would ask that the board order accordingly. And then the only matter sort of left up for what's now going to amount to a briefer discussion relates to the total value for the property. We're much closer, we're still a wee bit out, and the allocation of that total value among the school tax exempt component and the taxable component. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pontinia, do you have any questions in regards to the liability?
No, I have no questions. I took a review internally, and I'm fairly confident that I understand the operations that are going on there. So it seems to be appropriate to deem the class of liability, or to, sorry, adjust the liability.
I thank you. Ms. McFadden, do you have any questions in regards to liability?
No, I don't.
Okay. Mr. Mahone?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
All right. So let's go back to Mr. Pontinia. The recommendation, I think we have all the figures. And you've changed your cap rate to 6 3/4.
Yes, that's correct.
6 3/4. All right. Panel members, any questions in regards to the assessed value?
I do not.
Thank you.
No, none for me.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Reimer, we're ready for your presentation.
He didn't ask any questions yet.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Mr. Reimer, you have questions in regards to the recommendation?
I actually, Mr. Chairman, the only question I'd have, Mr. Pontinia, and again, now we appreciate your efforts, and with respect to then the two smaller CRUs, this is now on your page 8 of the two smaller ones are 1,016 square feet and 1,024 square feet, and the model rates are in the range of $18, just north of that. Those are both model driven rates, correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Chairman, that's my only question. Thank you.
Panel members, any questions in regards to the rec?
I have no questions, no.
No, neither do I. Thanks.
Mr. Reimer, your presentation? I think
Thank you.
I'm a little Okay, all right, you may proceed.
And so actually, based on Mr. Pontania's presentation, we have narrowed the issues very, very significantly, and I'm going to narrow them again. If I might have just one moment, please. Okay, could we please initially go to my page 13 of my main submission? And on page 13, my original suggestion to the board this afternoon, as you can see there, was to value the entire property, including the connect space, at a value of $1,217,000. Here's the change, starting with the change that I'm going to make and suggest to this board. I've suggested in the original presentation a capitalization rate of 7%. I appreciate where the department's coming from at 6.75, and I am going to suggest that I will amend my request to also use the 6.75% rate. I think that's certainly within the range of what we're talking about here. So if you might make a note, Mr. Chairman, I'm still suggesting my net operating income shown on page 13 of $85,193. Then though applying the capitalization rate of 6.75%. And what that leads you to is a revised valuation for the total property of $1,262,000. And so that would be the request. And then now I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit so that we can deal with the valuation of the school tax. What we're now agreeing is the school tax exempt space. So on page 16 of our materials, on page 16, this is the valuation that I had done in the original submission for just the Connect employment space. As you can see there, using the same parameters, I had suggested initially a value of $865,000 rounded. That was including the application of a 7% capitalization rate, and I'm going to amend that request to 6.75% on the capitalization rate. So using that same NOI of $60,529, and then applying a capitalization rate of 6.75%, the revised request for the school tax exempt space is $897,000. What that leaves then with the revised request. So the total request, if you recall, Mr. Chairman, is $1,262,000. And then if we take out the $897,000 for the school tax exempt space, the taxable component would be $365,000. So again, total request of $1,262,000 based upon a school tax exempt component of $897,000 and a taxable component of $365,000. So with that in mind, then if we might briefly turn back to my page 13. So as you can see on page 13, the primary differences now relate to, there's a small difference in rent and there's a difference in non-recoverable expense allowances. On the rental rate, and I'm going to be very brief now because the differences we're within $10,000, actually $9,000 of each other on the rent. But just to give the board the sense of where we're coming from with the rent, on page 11, the middle of page 11, we're showing the 3 tenants in place, including the Connect employment with the November's 2017 lease at $13, and the Mantra space under a July 16 lease at $14, and then the Liberty Tax Service just under $14 under an older February 2011 lease. The average rate for those 3 units is 13.25, and we believe it's consistent with market indicators for comparable properties. There's a chart at the bottom of page 11 ranging from $10 up to $18 with a median average, I should say, of $15 and a median of 15.25. Not every property, of course, will perform the same, and we're suggesting that these rates fall well within that range and wouldn't be prone to any adjustment as being non-market. We believe they're well within the market indicators. So then if we go back to page 13, with that conclusion, then the total potential rent we have is $98,076. no dispute as to the market vacancy or the other parameters, save and except for the non-recoverable expense. So with your permission, Mr. Chair, what I would propose to do is, and I recognize all the panel members here. In fact, I've seen some of you, I think all of you within the past week. I know you're familiar with the non-recovered, and it's Friday afternoon, so I propose to be very brief. If you recall, and it's your option, Mr. Chairman, feel free to open the non-recoverable study, but we've been through it so many times. I'm just going to go based on, at a very high level, based on the highlights of the study.
That's fine, Mr. Reimer.
So if you recall, our the first pillar of that study is based upon the original intent of the expense allowance, which we believe, based on the assessor's previous manual, was always intended to be an allowance for non-recoverable expenses, even where tenants are on triple net leases. That's on page 2 of the study. We looked at appraisal theory, and the appraisal theory also confirms that these kind of non-recoverable expenses, space marketing costs, which includes in our submission leasing commissions, and those types of costs have to be recovered. We looked at some other provinces, the Saskatchewan and Ontario municipal assessment manuals specifically. They also talk about the accounting for these types of expenses. In the chart, and again, if you recall, there's 2 columns in the chart, one of which includes tenant inducements, which results in much higher percentages. We're not relying on it. We provide that for information. The other chart being this, which is a second from right-hand column in the chart, being the amount not including TIs, and that still comes in at averages and medians of in and around 6%. So with all that being said, we believe the 5% is appropriate. On the pages just following that, that was the new part of the submission for this cycle, where we're demonstrating using the same set of assumptions for concerning a notional transaction, what the effect of the inclusion of the 5% in the cap rate versus reducing it to 0, or, which is more relevant for our discussion, reducing it from 5 to 1%. The mathematical effect, if you recall, is to increase this capitalization rate using the same assumptions by roughly 33 basis points. We're suggesting if the non-recoverable expense is reduced from 5% to 1%, if the panel chooses to do that, then we're asking that the capitalization rate be increased by 25 basis points. In this case, as I've mentioned, I'm agreeing with the 6.75% rate, but that is predicated on the inclusion of the 5% non-recoverable. So if this board is inclined to exclude the 5%, that would have the effect of increasing our capitalization rate request to from 6.75% to 7%. So with all that being said, then if we go back very briefly to page 13, you can see there with the inclusion of the 5% non-recoverable, we're coming in at an NOI of $85,193. So again, the difference is being about $9,000 on the potential market income, and then a slightly higher expense for non-recoverable expenses. But capping the $85,193 at 6.75%, including the 5% non-recoverables, results in a total value of $1,262,000 with an allocation of $897,000 to the 40S school tax exempt and $365,000 to the Code 60 taxable. Thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Potania, any questions in regards to the presentation from Mr. Reimer?
No, I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden?
No, I have no further questions.
I thank you. Mr. Mahone?
Yeah, just with Mr. Reimer, with respect to the rental amounts used, and I know you're very close in the gross potential rent. I'm looking at page 13, where you've got $13 per the top, $13 per square foot, $14 and $13.80. If I compare those with the master rent roll, though, later on in your appendix, it looks like $14.14 and $13.80, not $14.13 and $13.80. Have I misread that?
Well, no, Mr. Mann, perhaps your eyes are sharper than mine. So let me take a look.
Just trying to find the page number.
Sorry, I'll find it as well. I'm looking through it. You're absolutely right. You're bang on. Mr. Chairman, page 31. Connect had a step up. If you look at that first tenancy, Connect is at $14. The initial term was at the lower rate, but they clearly had a step. So Mr. Mann is bang on with his comments. And so that's going to add to my potential rent. That's going to add $5,300, and now we're down to virtually zero. So I'm going to suggest that now we're down to within a couple of $1,000, and the only difference then now comes down to the non-recoverable. So Mr. Mann, thank you. I did not catch that step up, and you're exactly right. And so the only difference of any substance is the non-recoverable expense item of 5%. Thank you.
Thanks. That was all I had.
Does that change your bottom line at all, Kerry?
You had to ask, Mr. Chairman. Absolutely it would. So if you can give me a minute, let me run this through.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So no, you're that's absolutely right. Absolutely right. So let me do this.
Okay.
I'll be 1 second.
Okay.
I think it
So,
adds about
Mr.
75,000.
Mr. Chairman, so the revised, pardon me, the revised potential market income, the top line income, goes now to 103,439. And now I'm gonna just go straight down to the NOI to give you the next set of numbers using the same parameters there.
Yeah.
Revised NOI is 89,981. Capped at, as I suggested, 675. Revised total value is 1,333,000. So if we might keep that number in mind. And now, of course, I have to go to my page 16 because this will directly impact the school tax exempt component with the application of the higher rent. So if I might have a moment, and I will give you that revised figure.
Yes, if you don't mind.
Oops. Okay, the revised NOI now for the school tax exempt space is 65,317, capped at 675. That then results in a revised assessment request for the 40S component of 968,000. And again, that's based upon the application of the higher $14 rent. So 968,000, which then means that the taxable component becomes 365,000. So revised request of 365,000 for 60T and 968,000 for the 40S.
Sorry, wasn't it 365 before? It was 365 before.
Oh yes, no, it was, and that wouldn't change because the only thing that's changing, Ms. McFadden, is the school tax exempt component.
Okay.
The taxable part is exactly the same.
Okay, got it.
Thank you, and again, thanks to Mr. Mann for picking up on that.
Okay. Mr. Pontonia, any, I know we're a little out of order, but any questions in regards to the new calculations or anything like that?
No, I think that for myself, I was aware of the $14 per square foot, but what I was taking a look at when I was doing my evaluation is what the model had given the overall. So originally we had 7,000 403 square feet at $14.51 per square foot at the original recommendation, or sorry, the original valuation. And when I revised to my recommendation, I was looking at that overall price, and using $13, it got me to $14.46. So it was almost around where the model had it originally. But that's also using the parameters that we have. So I know Mr. Reimer has his own parameters, so maybe 14 can work. It's up to you guys. I have no questions or anything to add to it.
Okay, either party want summation?
No, thank you.
I'm okay on my end too, thank you.
Okay. Okay, let's go to a little further down the street. Number 125 Goulet Street, Mr. Potania, whenever you're ready. You're muted. Mr. Pontania.
Sorry, I was muted there.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, here I go. So up next, we have file 22-3436. The roll number is 0609-290-0000. The 2023 assessed value has gone out at $4,414,000. So this file has been labeled as a CMRNS, or a commercial retail neighborhood shopping center. We have an effective year of 1975. We have a total leasable area on this subject of 15,366 square feet. So if we look on, I believe it's page 2, or it might be page 3 of your guys, whichever the next page is, we can see the image of the parcel on our pad eye view. You can see the subject property that we're speaking of. And then the following page has the pictometry overhead view of the subject property. And then following that, we have a south-facing view and an east-facing view of the subject property. We can see it's oriented on Goulet Street and Taché Avenue. And then following that, we have the Google Street View images from the 2021 map overlay. So it's a fairly recent map overlay of the subject property. Looks like we have received all the income and expense mailer requests from them, so we're okay on that. And we do have a sale from 2007 for $1,125,000. And then following that, we do have the rent comparables that I've included. These are all labeled as CMRNS properties, so they should all fall to within the same usage as the subject. And I did try to find the effective years to be similar to the subject property. And we do have a range from, I believe it's $18, sorry, at the lower end, up to $21.99 at the higher end. Following that, I have included some bank rent comparables. So these are admittedly from, not necessarily from immediately within the subject area, but they are all rents of leases of banks that we have, some bank lease information. And then we do have a rental rate range from, I believe it's $25 it's showing there at the lower end, to $44.79 at the higher end. And then on page 9, we do have the subject's income valuation. So we do have the first premise is the B1 bank, and we do have the premise at 4,716 square feet at $25.26 per square foot. Following that, we have a 1,200 square foot premise at $20.60 per square foot, a 1,400 square foot premise at $20.38 per square foot, a 1,200 square foot premise at $20.60 per square foot, 1,000 square foot premise at $20.86 per square foot, and a 5,850 square foot premise at $18.45 per square foot. That brings us to a total valuation of $325,891 in total potential rent for 15,366 square feet. And then from there, we have model parameters in place of a 4% vacancy, a 3% expense, and a $9 shortfall per square foot to bring us to our net operating income of $297,937. And then from there, we have a 6.75% cap rate applied, which gives us a total value of $4,414,000. On page 10, we have a summary of the valuation that we just spoke of. And then on page 11, we do have some capitalization rates that we're offering. And then under the regional or power center neighborhood shopping centers, NSCs, we do have the 20th and the 80th percentile from 6.35 to 6.95%. So it looks like the subject's 6.75 might be okay for it. And then following that, we do have some Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And then taking us to the end of my brief is the subject's 2020 income and expense mailer. And I believe that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Reimer, questions?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And there'll be just a couple of brief questions concerning cap rate. If I might suggest that I'll ask them once and have those comments carried forward.
Okay.
So Mr. Pontinia, turning briefly to your page. Now I'm going by the page numbers that are printed on the brief. I'm looking at your page 9. I don't know if that's the PDF number, page 10, but it's in any event, the valuation. Okay, so starting with the capitalization rate. So the 6.75%, I believe you alluded to it, that's a model driven rate, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and the department, you've referenced the chart, the summary chart on page 11. The department, of course, hasn't provided you with any information as to specific transactions that were applied or the parameters used to come to those conclusions in this brief, correct?
That's correct.
And we can agree that you need not turn there, Mr. Pontinia, I'm sure you know this, but we can agree that this is an older strip. It was built in 1965.
That's correct.
And the land to building ratio is very low at 2.12 to 1 in this case, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Could we turn briefly to your page? And Ms. Pontinia, this is going to seem like an unfair question, and I don't expect you to know, but I'm going to ask it, and then we'll go from there.
Sure.
To your page 17, please, which is the rent roll that was submitted by the owner to the department in its request for 2020 information. Let me know when you're there.
I'm there.
Okay. So the Royal Bank of Canada, and the reason I focus, Mr. Chairman, on that tenancy is there's a lot involved with that tenancy, but that's effectively the only difference in the potential rent calculation. So Royal Bank, you can see that this was an original 2010 lease, November of 2010, with a step up in November of 2015, correct?
That's correct.
And you can see as well, when you look at the expiry date, that lease expired on October 31st, 2020. You're aware of that?
That's what it's showing.
Okay. Now my question, and this is the unfair part of it, are you familiar with what happened after that date in terms of a renewal or the discussions between the owner and the Royal Bank subsequent to the lease expiry?
I am unaware.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, and again, with the questions asked and answered concerning non-recoverables, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden?
My question has been asked and answered. Thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Mahone?
No, I have nothing further. Thanks.
Okay, I thank you. I have no questions. Mr. Reimer, your presentation?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, if the board members and Mr. Pontinia might turn to our main submission on page 13. So I'll start, as you can see there, we're suggesting a total potential income of $312,036. So we're about $13,000, almost $14,000 less than the department's model driven rate. But within that, the reason for my question about the RBC space is because really the entire difference amounts to the market net rent for the Royal Bank space. We're actually $20,000 lower in that case, which of course leads to the conclusion that for the rest of the CRUs, the average rates we're using, which are based on leases negotiated very near the reference date for in some cases is actually higher than what the model was kicking out in this case. So the total potential there, as you see, is 312,000. Same parameters applied up to non-recoverables where it's still at 5% and cap rate at 7.25. In this particular rate, I believe the circumstances of this property would warrant the 7.25 rate, and I'll get into that very shortly. But I did want to talk briefly about the Royal Bank space. If you recall my question, and I've submitted the same documents, the Royal Bank lease that had been in effect ending in October of 2020, actually it did come to an end. And I'd asked the board members and Mr. Pontinia, I'm looking for the page reference where I submitted it. If we might turn to my page 27, please. And if you look at page 27, the first row item again is the Royal Bank of Canada. And as you can see there, November of 2020 was the indicated start date for this notional lease for a term of 5 years. But if you look to the right, the dollars per square foot has, in parentheses, has TBD, to be determined. The reason for that, and this is what, there was no way for Mr. Pontinia to know this without thoroughly reviewing what had happened after October of 2020. The Royal Bank actually was, the landlord and the Royal Bank were unable to agree upon a renewal rate, and the Royal Bank was taking the matter to arbitration and took the matter to arbitration. They were suggesting that they would be only interested in paying a reduced rent. They weren't even interested at that time in maintaining the $21 rate. That's a function of obviously a number of items, circumstances involved with the pandemic, quite possibly, I'd suggest, some concerns with this particular location. So there was a very, very high degree of uncertainty as of the reference date that the arbitration matters, of course, they take quite a bit of time. And as of the reference date, no resolution at all was in sight. In fact, they were just in the process, the parties, the landlord and the tenant, of compiling the materials and doing the due diligence and doing the things they needed to do in order to take the matter to hearing. So in that context, if we then go back to page 13, my submission, Mr. Chairman, is based upon the application of a net rent, the same net rent of $21, but with the understanding that the Royal Bank was disputing that a renewal rate should even be that much. So with the application of that $21 rate and the other $20 rates, then that results in that potential marketing of $312,000. I will just briefly, by way of explanation, if we might turn to page 11, please. Middle of page 11, there's a chart, and this shows how we got to our potential income. And as you can see, I had mentioned the CRUs. As you can see, there was a great many leases. Actually, 4 out of those 5 leases were negotiated between late 2018 and April 1 of 2020, all at the $20 rate. By coincidence, the 2017, August of 17 lease was at the $20 as well. As I mentioned, that average rate, which is obviously $20, is actually higher than the department's average rate for those CRUs. So our difference again comes back to the Royal Bank space. So then if we turn very briefly back to page 13, we've got the slight difference, well, not slight, but the $13,000 difference in the potential rent, non-recoverables for the reasons we mentioned, and then the capitalization rate of 7.25%. So I would like to spend a little bit of time on that. If I might ask, Mr. Chairman, if the board members, Mr. Pontinia, might open our capitalization rate study. And again, knowing all of the participants at this hearing well, then I'm going to be very brief. I am happy to certainly go over anything that I don't specifically canvass, because I do want to be brief, but if you happy to answer any questions, but I would propose to be very, very short on this. If one turns to page 5, and there's a lot of commentary about the pre-pandemic environment, but I did want to bring to the board's attention again, the disposition by RioCan, which was Canada's largest retail REIT, obviously a very significant player nationally. And there's an article that talks about the sale of quite a number of properties, and it states in the second paragraph, after they sold 100 properties, if guidance for the future of retail in Canada is to be taken from this change in direction for RioCan, it may be that retail as an asset class is a questionable focus. given RealCan's move towards a more diversified portfolio. So certainly there were some questions about the viability in the retail real estate sector, in large part due to the prevalence and the increasing prevalence of the online business model and the effect on brick and mortar operations from that model. So if we turn to I'll leave the board for the board's reference for the pre-pandemic comments. I do want to skip forward to some of the commentary relating to the pandemic environment that of course we were right in the thick of as of the reference date. If we could turn to page 8, please. So towards halfway down page 8 is where the real commentary starts with respect to the impacts of the pandemic on the retail sector generally. And there's an article from the University of Canada West at the bottom of page 8, and it states that the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the way we buy things. With so many people staying home and most brick and mortar stores closed because of government mandated shutdowns, we've been shopping less overall. That stands to reason. But when we do shop, it's becoming increasingly from our computers, tablets, and phones. In March of 2020, so this is a couple of months into the pandemic, the most recent month with available information at the time this article was written, Canadian retail e-commerce sales totaled 2.2 billion, up 40% from a year ago, StatsCan said. That was despite a 10% drop in retail sales overall. So of course that entirely makes sense in the context of the pandemic, but it's important to note that the trend or the acceleration of this trend was perceived to be permanent. At the top of page 9, there's the concluding paragraph that sort of talks about this, and it says, although stores are reopening as lockdowns ease up, industry experts say we won't go back to our old buying habits even after the pandemic ends and the economy improves. And we certainly think that was borne out by the events between that time, March of 2020, and the reference date. Redshift Media had talked about these, what they dubbed as likely very permanent changes. And there's a chart at the middle of page 9 talking about doing more things at home. You can see there's a variety of metrics there, from shopping online to ordering products online, with significant numbers shown in green as doing so more frequently, confirming sort of the StatsCan article. More people obviously consuming food and drinks at home, and I'm on the right-hand side of that chart now. A lot more folks eating and cooking at home, and a significant portion also more frequently ordering food for pickup and delivery. So all of this, of course, would impact the brick and mortar operations. A very interesting commentary from this study at the bottom of page 9, and I'm at the second last indented paragraph, states buying habits have dramatically changed since the pandemic began. 85% of Canadians say that their shopping behavior has been affected by COVID-19, while 50% report they are now making online purchases for typical in-store items. Most importantly, 53% of North Americans say that they have changed the way they will shop going forward, indicating that the shifts that have taken place over the pandemic will have lasting impacts on retail. And certainly in our submission, Mr. Chairman, when you've got retail strip centers like the subject, those are a lot of the businesses that are going to be the most impacted by that change, what's been described as likely permanent change in shopping behavior. At the bottom of page 10, and this is again talking about, there's a lot of commentary about the shift from brick and mortar in-store shopping to online retailing. And at the bottom of page 10, PwC had a commentary in their excellent study called Emerging Trends in Real Estate, which they put out annually. And they state that the interviewees that they were, again, real estate investors and managers, interviewees are seeing a structural shift in retail, but it's an acceleration of the move toward e-commerce already underway. And that certainly is we suggest, was very obvious during the pandemic. If we move to briefly to pages 14 and 15, this is a report by the Retail Insider, and again, it's talking about the trends towards online stores and the shift to the online business model. And at the bottom of page 15, again, I know I'm skipping over this very quickly because I know the board members have been through this, but at the bottom of page 15, it's a very interesting conclusion, and it says a transformation in the retail industry has been happening slowly over the past several years, being the shift to online business. but the pandemic accelerated the sea change. It was moving too slowly before, Hutchinson said, one of the real estate experts they were interviewing. We were starting to see, bits and pieces, and it's really just accelerated at warp speed during the pandemic. So those shifts certainly we're suggesting would be, very likely permanent changes to a large extent, obviously not to the extent that the government mandated shutdowns eased up. There's going to be some return to the brick and mortar operations, but fundamentally what was called, as I mentioned earlier, a structural shift, certainly going to impact the real estate sector and strip malls like these in particular in the longer term. Starting at page 16 then, there's several pages with a very interesting set of studies that Altus had the opportunity to conduct with the largest real estate owners and investors, including obviously retail owners, investors, and managers. And we asked a number of questions. Page 17, the question related to sort of perceptions of where market rates were headed. There was a very, as you can see by the red bars, a very pronounced negative perception of the red bars being expectation of decreases. But I want to focus then on pages 18 and 19, because of course, one of the topics of discussion that was of great interest was how these very sophisticated real estate owners, investors, managers, how they perceive or what they perceive to be the trends for capitalization rates, specifically around retail properties. And at the bottom of page 18, you can see the retail top quality properties, and I do not consider, to be clear, this is not a top quality. At best, I'd suggest this is an average retail property. But the top quality properties, the dark bars, the bar chart there, the dark bars represent the responses in November of 2020, roughly 8 months or 9 months into the pandemic. The lighter beige shaded bars representing the earlier survey that was conducted in June. And I'm going to focus on the November bars being closer to the reference date. And as you can see there, even for top quality retail assets, the expectation was, or the perception was, that capitalization rates going into 2021 would increase between 25 and 50%. Majority of respondents saying that. Very significant numbers also suggesting it could be even higher, even as much as 100 basis points. On page 19 then, sorry, the lower quality retail properties, and that's where the subject I would suggest would fit into, was that the responses were even more telling in that there was still obviously a significant portion thinking that the cap rates would increase between 25 and 50 basis points, but a great many more suggesting that the increases in cap rates would be much higher still. 50 to 75 basis point increases were expected by roughly 30% of the respondents. And again, a significant number, roughly 20%, suggesting that they might even go up 100 basis points, between 75 and 100. So with all of that to sort of set the stage for the discussion and frame the discussion around the capitalization rates for that should be applied for these retail strip kind of properties. If we go briefly to page 24, and again, recall, Mr. Chairman, that our capitalization rate analysis does include the full 5% non-recoverable expense allowance. We've provided, though, for the board's reference, the equivalent cap rate using the very same sets of data, save and except for a reduction to the 1% of the non-recoverable expense from 5% to 1%. So as you can see there, though, focused on the column that's with the inclusion of the full 5%, capitalization rates for the most part were sort of in the 6 to mid 7s. There's a couple below 6, and there was also one that was well north of 8%. So the conclusions that we've come to through this data are on page 32. And again, in the case of the subject, I'm placing the subject in the category, at the upper end of the category of retail standard quality. This property, quite bluntly, would equally, I'd suggest, be in the lower quality range. Recall that the building's a lot older, the land to building ratio is very low, and there was a high degree of uncertainty given RBC's pushback on the rent, even at the $21 rate. But I am going to maintain that at minimum, the 7.25% cap rate being the upper end of the standard quality rates be applied in this case. for the reasons that are set forth in the study. So if we then briefly go back to the main brief on page 13, just to conclude. Let me know when you're there, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Kerry.
So on page 13, then we've got the, as mentioned, the using the $21 rate, which is notwithstanding that it was in dispute, and the remaining parameters, including the 7.25 cap, we come in at a value of $3,766,000. Thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Pontonia, any questions of Mr. Reimer?
Just one question for Carrie. If we look, sorry, Carrie. If we look on page 24 of your cap rate study, I'll give you a second to get there.
Yes.
Out of the indexes there, do you have any idea which ones you would consider to be most appropriate to the subject?
So the William Avenue property, and the reason I say that, and Mr. Pontonia's question is a good one, Mr. Chairman. The William Avenue property is a transaction that occurred during the pandemic at 6.85%. But the difference there being it's also a smaller, what would be considered a retail strip, but it was also occupied by restaurants. Now, having said that, the location of that property and the business model for what was being operated out of there was at least as good, if not better than the subject. So, Mr. Pontonia, I'd suggest, because of the timing of that one, that is a good comparable. And also, if we go back to index number 3, this was pre-pandemic, recall. That indicated cap rate is 6.57%, and that's a strip mall in Goulet. Again, though, it's a significantly newer strip, and I would consider the location is certainly very comparable. But the two factors I would consider that we must adjust for would relate to the fact that that was long prior to the pandemic creating very different, very elevated risk, and the fact that that property was substantially newer. So those I would suggest would be the likely the two most comparable within the framework of the discussion around the pandemic.
Okay, great. That's all my questions. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden?
I have no further questions.
I thank you. Mr. Mahone?
Just with respect to the cap rate and these, you indicated that the third in your cap rate study, the other address on Goulet, which actually was the previous address that we just dealt with, you said it was substantially newer, but the effective year on this one is 1975. That would lead to a difference of 5 years. Is that?
I understand the effective year, Mr. Mann. I'm familiar with both properties, and certainly, I mean, the owner of the subject is not going to let the property waste, so he's going to maintain it. But that other property, I'd suggest the condition is significantly better. And again, much different circumstances in with index number 3 in September of 2016 than in the pandemic period on the reference date. But yes, on paper, the 75 and 80, it seems close, but land to building ratios, the RBC dispute, everything else, the risk here, I'd suggest, and the pandemic generally, the risk would be substantially higher.
Okay. The next question I have is the studies that Altus did and the opinions that the cap rates were all going to increase by significant amounts. I'm looking at the chart on page 21 of your cap study, and it actually shows the reverse of that. Does that not show a very slight compression of capitalization rates over the operative time? So
if we're looking at the regional, sorry, Mr. Mann, which, like, they've got only very select properties here. So tier 1 regional mall actually was going up. If you look at that line, AA class office, obviously that's not this. Single tenant industrial, it's not this. Now industrial is a different kettle of fish, so I won't comment on that. Right. And residential is obviously not this. So the only, and it's not even really analogous, I'd suggest, but the tier 1 regional mall, if you look at that blue shaded line, that's actually going up. I'm going to be very sort of blunt in my comments. Those regional malls had problems a lot of them had problems unto themselves. They were very different animals. And so they, like every other retail operation, they were certainly impacted by the pandemic, but I don't take the tier 1 regional mall as having application to the subject. So question's a good one. And if you look at the one retail indicator there, it is actually increasing quite substantially.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
I thank you. Summation, either party?
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
All right, let's press on. We'll go to number 15 Marion Street. Mr. Pontanilla, whenever you're ready.
All right. 1 second to open it up here. Okay. So up next, we have file 22-1946. The roll number is 0609-177-0200. The address is 15 Marion Street. This valuation has a split in its overall valuation, so it has gone out as two components too. We have a 60T and a 40S. So for 2023, the original assessed value has gone out at $17,331,000 for the 60T split and $1,534,000 for the 40S split, for a total valuation of $18,865,000. And I do have a recommendation to make on this file. And then as always, as we're scrolling down, if you just happen to take a few seconds to take a look at the pictures I've included, so we have an idea of the subject property we're speaking of there. So this one has many moving components to the overall valuation, so I will like to guide us through it as clearly as possible. But with that being said, when I did my recommendation, the income streams are kind of jumbled around on me, so they might not necessarily correspond to what's in the brief, but I'll do my best to take us through it. So on page 17 of what I'm looking at for my PDF, it might be slightly different on yours. Page 18, it should be the neighborhood shopping center income stream, and it should be the 60T in the top right. If you just give me 1 second, I'm just going to line it up with my recommendation form, okay? So this one has many premises, so I won't take us through all of them. So maybe if I just go to the overall total on this income stream, we have 50,225 square feet at $1,178,836. That was the model-driven total potential rent. From there, we have the model parameters of a 5% vacancy, a 3% expense, and a $9 shortfall per square foot, to give us the original net operating income of $1,063,696. And then we had a cap rate applied of 6.7% to bring us to our original valuation on this one, on this income stream of $15,876,000. So from there, I did do a review of the property, and I was able to make two adjustments. So the two adjustments to this income stream are going to be to premise 3576. So if you look at premise 3576, there's a C2 standard finished retail space there for 7,191 square feet. So originally the model had that at $27.18. And after taking a review of the subject's income and expense mailer information, I adjusted the rent to $22 per square foot. And that gives us a revised potential rent of $158,202. That's for premise 3576. And then the following adjustment will be for premise 3580. And that is also a C2 retail premise. And originally we had 3,166 square feet at $28.77 per square foot. That is now being revised to $25 per square foot, which revises that premise's total potential rent of $79,150. All the other premises remain the same, so we now have the total potential rent, the revision of $1,129,651. From there, we have 5% vacancy, a 3% expense rate, and a $9 shortfall per square foot rate applied, which gives us a revised net operating income of $1,018,372. So once again, 1,018,372. And then from there, I have adjusted the cap rate slightly to 6.75%, which gives us a revised valuation on this income stream of $15,087,000. So that completes that portion of the income stream. So if we move on now to the original briefs, page 18 on my sheet, it could be slightly different on your brief in front of you. That would be the parking lot income stream. So on the parking lot income stream, originally we have 47 stalls at $45 a monthly net unit rent per stall, which gives us an annual rental value of $25,380. From there, there was a 5% cap rate applied, which gives us the original valuation of $508,000. And so for this one, I was able to maintain, I did maintain the original 47 stalls at $45 per square foot. So the net operating income of $25,380 stays the same, but the cap rate was adjusted to 5.25%. And that adjustment gives us a new valuation of $483,000 on the parking lot stream, 483. So if you guys are okay with that, and we return to my original brief, if we move on to the next income stream, we do have a store kiosk with a pump. That's the Domo that's operating out of the parcel there. And so originally we had it as a C5 kiosk at 398 square feet at $104.35 per square foot to give us a total potential rent of $41,531. From there, we have applied a modeled vacancy of 2%, 3% expense rate, and a $6 shortfall per square foot to give us a net operating income of $39,431. And then from there, we applied a 4.9% cap rate to give us our original valuation of $947,000. And so for the adjustment on this one, I did keep the rental rate the same. So we still have 398 square feet at $104.35 to give us a total potential rent of $41,531. And then we have kept these same model parameters of a 2% vacancy, 3% expense, and a $6 shortfall to give us the net operating income of $39,431. The adjustment to this stream was to increase the cap rate by 1 percentage point to 5.9%. And that gives us a revised valuation on the kiosk, the SKP stream of $810,000. And the reason for the 810 is because there is an additional building value of 142 on the capitalized value of 668,322. Just so you're aware. And then if we can move on now, I believe this is the last component to the evaluation. So this would be
Mr. Pontonia, so the kiosk in total is $952, eh?
The kiosk in total, the revised value is $810,000. 810.
Yes, plus the pumps.
No. So the pumps that would include the additional building value. So sorry, I gave it to you as a summary. Once I increase the cap rate to 5.9%, the capitalized value is actually $668,322. And then when you add the $142,000 in additional building value, i.e. the pumps, that's what gives us the revised value of $810,000. That's okay there?
I don't quite follow that because
So So if you look on page, if we go back to my original valuation on
Yes.
page, it shows
Yeah, that's what
19 of my brief.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at. So, I had, your original value was, 804,714.
Yep,
Okay, plus the pumps.
yep,
So that came into a total of 947.
that's correct.
So now you're saying it's going to be 810.
Now it's going to be 810 total. So from 947, it's now going to be 810.
So you're not taking the pumps into consideration, or
Yes.
overall it's done?
Yeah, overall it's 810. So what I did was that by increasing the cap
Okay.
rate to 5.9%, it
That's
reduced the cap value to 668,322.
Fine, that's fine. I just want to know. Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Okay then? Okay. Okay, and then so for the last component, that'd be the income stream 4. This would be the 40S component of the income stream. We have 5,510 square feet at $20.73 per square foot. From there, we have modeled parameters of a 5% vacancy, a 3% expense, and a $9 shortfall per square foot to give us our modeled net operating income of $102,776. And then we have a model cap rate of 6.7% applied to give us a total value of $1,534,000. So my adjustment to that, if you just give me 1 second, as my income streams are kind of off here from. So my adjustment to that one would be to maintain the rental rate, maintain all the other parameters. So we still have the same net operating income of $102,776, and then just increasing the cap rate to 6.75%. And then that gives us a revised value of $1,523,000. And that brings us to the very end, which gives us a total revised value as a whole of $17,903,000. And I can give you that split into both components. Just let me know when you're ready.
Go ahead.
Okay, so that total was 17,903,000. When you split it into both components, it's for the 60T, it's $16,380,000. So 16,380,000. And then for the 40S component, it's $1,523,000. And that should add up to the total revised assessment of $17,903,000.
You're down about $1 million.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
And that's my presentation. I hope I was clear on that. There was a lot of moving parts, so.
Mr. Reimer, are you in agreement?
I don't have instructions, but I appreciate Mr. Fontaniera's diligence, and I am in agreement, subject just to getting those instructions in due course. So yes, I am.
Okay. I thank you. Ms. McFadden, questions?
No, I have no questions.
Mr. Mahone?
I don't have any questions. I might have to go get more paper in a little while, though.
Okay.
It was a long one. I don't think we have any more on the rest of the docket that are that complex.
Wow. I just have to make a couple more little notes here. 3. Okay, that's 3.
I will say thank you, Mr. Reimer.
Yes, thank you. All right. Okay. 3. Okay. Let's go to the next one, which is 553 St. Mary's Road. And I think, Mr. Fontanier, you can read it into the roll, and this has got 3 points again. So, Mr. Pontanilla, you can just read it so it's into the record, then we'll talk about liability.
Sorry,
I think it does.
I noticed I was muted there. You just give me 1 second. I'm just opening up my
Yep.
notes here.
Yeah, items 4, 5, and 7.
Oh, okay.
That's fine.
All right, so
Okay.
I'm not seeing a class and liability challenge, I guess, on my end. So I'm not sure if maybe there was something.
Yeah, that's what-
I'll ask
Mr.
Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I can advise on this. Class and liability were in fact included as grounds of appeal. And we're asking for the classification and liability to be confirmed at this time pending our further investigations. And Mr. Pontanilla, just for the sake of transparency, we do expect to make application to your department directly, not in the context of this hearing, but with respect to the administrative application once we have our due diligence done on a couple of tenants that have taken occupancy since the reference date. So we'll be in touch on that.
Okay, perfect.
All right, so we'll just proceed along. We will discuss that with the panel members in regards to liability and class. So, Mr. Pontanilla, you can take us through this property if you don't mind.
Sure. So up next on the docket, we have file 22-1655. The roll number is 0800 02002. Sorry, 0800-029-2400. We're seeing that a little off there. The address is 553 St. Mary's Road. The 2023 assessed value has gone out at $1,094,000. And so once again, we are speaking of a CMRNS property type. We have 8 premises included. It's a 1-story building. We have an effective year of 1981 on the subject. And we have a total leasable area of $6,958.
Square feet.
So following that, on page 2 of my brief, we have the pad eye view of the subject property, so we can see the subject that we're speaking of. And then on page 3, I do have an overhead pictometry view of the subject property. And so we can see that it looks like we have the subject property almost taking up the entire parcel on the corner of Harrowby and St. Mary's Road. And then there actually is an adjoining parking lot that's going to be, I guess, to the east of the subject property. Following that, we have some south-facing view and a west-facing view of the subject property. So we can just see its orientation there. And then following that, we do have some Google Street View images of the subject property from 2019 and the 2022 map overlay. And I have included a shot of the parking lot that's attached to the parcel, and then the parcel itself, or the building itself, I should say. And then from there, we have received all the requests for income and expense mailer information. We don't have a subject sales history for the subject property. And we do have some property leases in place, and they range from $12 on the first subject, $9.71, $12.99 following that, $11 following that, and $12 following that. For my rent comparables, I have included a variety of comparables that have the same CMRNS designation, and they are around to the same effective year. So we have a range from 1955 at the lower end to 1980 at the higher end. And we do have rental rates in place there showing from $12.60 or $12 actually at the lower end up to $21.48 at the higher end. On page 9, I do have the subject's income and the income valuation, and we do have 8 premises associated on the income stream. 7 of those are retail spaces, and we have 1 restaurant attached. The rental rates range from $11.56 at the lower end to $17.34 at the higher end. And that gives us a total of $90,230 in potential rent at 6,958 square feet. From there, we do have model parameters in place of a 6% vacancy, a 3% expense rate, and a $7 shortfall per square foot to give us our net operating income of $79,350. And then from there, we have a modeled cap rate of 7.25% to give us our total value of $1,094,000. On page 10, we do have a summary of the valuation that we just spoke of. And then on page 11, we do have the cap rate information that we provide in the brief. Page 12 is the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts that we provide in the brief. And then following that and taking us to the end of my brief is the subject's income and expense mailer information. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Reimer, question?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Questions asked and answered on non-recoverable and cap rate, please. Mr. Pontonia, if we might turn just very briefly to your page 7, which is the subject property leases.
Yep.
So the units 1 and units 4, we can agree that those were very short, much shorter term leases at 1 and 2 years, respectively, correct?
That's correct.
And now what you didn't have there, I'm not sure the reason for it, but in any event, were you aware that the restaurant, which is the Gondola Pizza Takeout, that was on a month-to-month lease term as well as of the reference date?
I have to check my notes on my mailer when I did my mailer review on it, but you're right that it's not showing up on here, so that's fair.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, those are my questions. Thank you.
I thank you. Ms. McFadden?
Just to confirm, this is all model driven then?
Yes, this is all model driven.
Okay, thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Mahone? Mr. Mahone?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Reimer, the floor is yours, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Could we please go to our submission, page 14? Again, minor differences in the scheme of things. The potential rent you can see there is $86,708. That is, call it $3,500 lower than the departments. As you can see, we've applied the rental rates in place, and I'll talk about that very briefly in a second, but that's one of the differences. Second difference is being non-recoverable, and the last difference, pardon me, being the capitalization rate that we're suggesting is 7.5%. So non-recoverables, I won't revisit. We've talked about that, but if we might turn then briefly to page 11. So on page 11, there's a chart, and this shows the rent, essentially the rental information in place. And if you note, Mr. Chairman, there's a number of things going on here. There was a March 2021 lease for the creative beauty space at $12 a square foot, being right before the reference date. Our average for the entire property is $12.41. So we're certainly suggesting that that very much stands to reason in context of the reference date being just a month later. The other thing, though, that's happening, and this gets into the capitalization rate discussion, the rate we're suggesting here is elevated at 7.5%. And the reason for that, and the reason for my question on Mr. Pontonia, if you look at the chart on page 11, a strong covenant for these commercial leases would be indicated by a lease term of typically 5 years or more. When you've got covenants or lease terms that are less than 3 years, that indicates some serious concerns with respect to either the viability of the tenant, whether the tenant intends on leaving shortly, for instance, if they're building their own place, or just outright plan on leaving after that term, or if if there's just question as to whether they're able to make a go of it at the location that they're at in the longer term. In this case, we've got 2 leases that were in that less than 3 year category, the creative beauty being the 2-year term, and then skipping down to unit 4, Cosmetica, being on a 1-year term. Then further, and this is the most uncertain of all, is when you've got a month-to-month overhold, and that's what Gondola Pizza was the lease terms they were on, and actually had been on since February of 19. That is the least secure covenant of all, but again, anything less than a 5-year term indicates some significant questions as to whether the tenant has any long-term plans on staying or can make the business viable. So in that context, then, and I won't go through it all, but briefly on page 12, there's a number of rental rates that we've provided for the board's reference, sort of confirming that the overall average rate that we've applied based on the performance of the property as the reference date is certainly within those parameters. So then if we turn to page 14, go back to the valuation summary, we've got an average rent, as you can see there, of $12.41 a square foot, based on the leases in place for the reasons we mentioned. And then the cap rate of 7.50%, reflecting in this case some very significant questions as to the intent of some of these tenants to be there in the longer term, and reflecting the elevated risk based on the fact that the landlord couldn't secure them for any significant length of time in 3 cases, representing a very significant, obviously, part of or segment of the overall total of the mall. So for those reasons, we're requesting a reduction this afternoon to a value of $971,000 based on the capitalization rate of 7.5. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reimer. Mr. Pontanilla, questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
All right. Ms. McFadden,
I don't have any further questions either.
I thank you. Mr. Mahone,
No questions, thank you.
how about if we take about a 10-minute break? Belen,
Yeah,
Okay.
that works.
everybody okay?
Yeah, that works. That's good to have. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Reconvene at 2:37.